everything about this is a balancing act between stress and mental health and physical health and, diet, exercise. They all go hand in hand.
I'm Becky Kiser, Hayes Post Eagle Radio News reporter, and I'm talking about how to understand pre-diabetes with Jessica Phelan from the Department of Health and Human Performance at Fort Hays State University. It's all on this episode of the Hayes Post podcast.
There's a lot of talk about diabetes, and so I thought I would come on and explain a little bit about, diabetes and, if you go to the doctor and they tell you, hey, you're pre-diabetic, like what's a rational response? Because I think sometimes you have this health news, it's, you're high cholesterol, you've got diabetes, something like that. And your initial response is to just go, oh no, I've got to change everything about my life. My life is never going to be the same. And so I thought I would just talk a little bit about what does that actually mean? And what are action items that you can take and still maintain a happy life? So first things first, let's talk a little bit about blood glucose. So blood glucose is what we're referring to when we're talking about diabetes, essentially. So carbohydrates are a really good source of energy. We need to have carbohydrates to function. So you have your brain and red blood cells, and they're called obligate glucose users, meaning that they function off of glucose. Your carbohydrates are composed of glucose at the smallest functional unit. And so when you eat carbohydrates, you are eating sugar. So think about your breads. That is broken down into sugar. Fruit, broken down into sugar. And people always forget this, but even your vegetables, of course, there's a lot of fiber in vegetables, but the stuff that's not, that's broken down into sugar too.
Yeah. You don't think about that with vegetables so much.
No, I mean, I think with like starchy potatoes and stuff like that, you can kind of put that two and two together. But yeah, so your grains, there's carbohydrates in dairy products too. Individuals sometimes forget that your dairy products are high in carbohydrates. So we have wonderful sources of carbohydrates in the diet, and you need to consume those to be a healthy person. So again, brain and red blood cells are obligate glucose users. You have to have them because that's what your brain and red blood cells, they like. They like that for their energy source. The other thing to remember too is 1 gram of carbohydrates equals 4 kilocalories. And so this is a really good thing. When you're consuming carbohydrates, you're consuming energy with them. So 4 calories for 1 gram. Of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, carbohydrates and proteins, they provide us with good energy, but not quite as much as fats. So when you consume a meal, what happens is you have all of this all of these digestive juices and this digestive function happens. And then finally, your sugars, they enter into the bloodstream. Okay, and that's a good thing. Again, we need that. That's something that people always forget. When we consume carbohydrates, cells either use them for energy immediately. They can also be stored, though. So they can be stored in your liver, and they can be stored in muscle tissue. And so if you guys have ever had a really high carbohydrate meal, and then you go to do some physical activity the next day, and you think, man, I'm doing great. I feel really, really good. Well, it's because you have accessible energy in muscle tissue.
That makes me think of like runners who that may do a high,
like a
load
pasta
up on
dinner.
carbs. Yeah, exactly, before they perform.
That's actually called carbohydrate loading. And
Yes.
It is a really powerful and very accessible way to maximize performance. So again, I'm telling you this because we need carbohydrates. They're often demonized in pop culture. People think if I cut out carbs, I'll lose weight. I want to go on a low carb diet. And in reality, you feel good when you're on carbohydrates. Think about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you're getting that slump. What do you reach for? Sugar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because your brain is saying, hey, I need something to wake me up. Like I need energy. And so carbohydrates are a good thing. One thing to note, though, is we need a steady supply of carbohydrates. We don't want to have them all at once. And so what happens is when we consume carbohydrates, again, go through this digestive process, and eventually they enter into the bloodstream. If you think about this, we don't want all of our carbohydrates as glucose to enter at one time because the body thinks, well, what do I do with this? So it's a better strategy over time to consume carbohydrates throughout the day. The other thing too is we have different types of carbohydrates that help to produce that steady supply. There's some of them that are broken down more quickly than others. And so the ones that are long lasting, those are the ones that usually help us with sustained energy. Quick carbohydrates are carbohydrates that really give us that boost very quickly when we need them. So examples of like fast acting carbohydrates would be like your simple sugars. So think about candies, think about honey, soda beverages. All of those would be fast carbohydrate sources. So they give you energy really fast, but then you crash too. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have some of those slow releasing carbohydrates, oats, whole grains, those all will provide you with more energy throughout the day, and it's a slower release. So how do we measure blood glucose then? Because what we're really talking about when looking at diabetes is the management of the sugars in the bloodstream. So there's a couple ways that we can measure blood glucose levels. Number one is like a finger prick method. You guys are probably familiar with this. Some of the commercials that you were talking about, you probably see them doing a little finger prick, and there's a little bit of blood that comes to the tip of the finger, and you put it on this monitor. This monitor will give you a reading. Usually the reading is between about 70 all the way up to, in a healthy person, about 130, 140. Anything above that, that's kind of, we're getting pretty far out of range. But it should give you a number within that range. This is inexpensive. It's easily accessible. It's over the counter too. And so individuals that have diabetes, of course, they will have one of these monitors. Individuals that don't, they also have access to them. So very fast, easy method. One thing to note is normal range for blood glucose is anywhere from 70 to 100. And so usually this is taken fasting or throughout the day. If you've been fasted for a while, it might fluctuate a little bit, but fasting blood glucose should be anywhere from about 70 to 100. And essentially what this means is it just means that your body is doing a good job of keeping the amount of glucose in your bloodstream pretty steady, pretty constant. It's accounting for peaks and valleys, and it's either storing carbohydrates or providing, releasing carbohydrates from the liver to keep your glucose pretty steady. The other thing that we can do is we can measure A1C, and that's what you were talking about on the commercials, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Okay. So A1C is really, really interesting. It shows your blood glucose levels over time. You're like, well, how does that work? How does that do that? So it actually measures the amount of glucose that's attached to red blood cells in your body. So the full name for it is HbA1c, and so it refers to hemoglobin A1c. And so this, again, over months of time, sugar will accumulate and attach to red blood cells. If you have too much sugar, you have uncontrolled amounts of glucose in your bloodstream over time, then more sugars will attach. So what we can do is we can actually measure that. And this is a more intensive type of measurement, but still very accessible. Like you could get this done at your local doctor's office for sure. So normal range is about 5.7%. Pre-diabetic is around 5.7-ish to 6.4, and then diabetic is if a person has 6.5% or higher. Okay, so let's do a scenario. Okay, you walk into your doctor's office and they tell you you're pre-diabetic. What is your response?
That my life's about to change and I'm never going to eat anything good again.
Yes, I can never eat ice cream. Like I never can have these foods that I love again, right? Immediately you think worst case scenario, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk about what to do. Number one, don't overreact. Just because you're pre-diabetic, it does not mean that you absolutely will have type 2 diabetes. That's one thing I want to reinforce is that you are pre-diabetic. It does not mean that you are quote unquote too far gone. Okay. You can still modify lifestyle, potentially go on medicine to where you do not have to become a type 2 diabetic. That is not at all what that means. Think of this as kind of like a warning flag. Like, hey, we see that there are some things that can be improved, and this is your sign that maybe let's get on it sooner than later. Number 2, listen to your physician's advice. Okay. What your physician says, they know the information. They know if, your background, they know your genetics. They also know if you have high cholesterol. They know other biomarkers in your body. And so listen to your physician, of course. And then number 3, understand that you can change these numbers through diet and exercise and medication. And so some really powerful tools are in your arsenal, and you can use those. And in a couple of months, you could go back and you could get an A1C reading that's completely normal. And so if you are pre-diabetic, again, think of it in your head as just kind of like a warning flag that if I don't do something now, it could get out of hand. So how do we manage blood glucose levels then? So one thing that I do want to talk about, and I kind of want to warn individuals that there are some advanced measurement tools that are now becoming over the counter. One of them is a continuous glucometer. Have you guys ever heard of a continuous glucometer?
I have not.
If you've walked around town, you might see their little devices that are on people's arms. And so they look almost like the size of about a bottle cap, but you usually see them like on the back of people's arms. Sometimes people will wear them on their stomach, but those are continuous glucometers. And for type 1 diabetics, type 2 diabetics, and now you can get them over the counter. What's really cool about these though is they do attach, it is in the skin. And so it's a little needle that's in the skin. It's a catheter, and they can read blood glucose in real time. And so they read blood glucose levels constantly throughout the day. Every couple of minutes, it will send a signal to your phone. And so you can actually see throughout the entire day what your blood sugar is doing. Now think of this contextually for a type 1 diabetic, phenomenal. They do not produce insulin. They have to monitor blood sugar levels, and they have to provide insulin either through a pump or through a shot. This is non-negotiable. Their body they are born this way. So to have a continuous glucometer for somebody that's a type 1 diabetic, that is truly life-changing. Makes them feel safe. The other thing that's really cool about it is you actually can get alerts on your phone when you're going low or high. And so it really is life-saving. Those with type 2 diabetes, that maybe it's a little bit more uncontrolled, phenomenal tool because they have the ability to keep their blood glucose levels more within range. The only thing that I want to just kind of raise caution to is for an individual that's not diabetic, not pre-diabetic, and wants to monitor their blood glucose levels, there's probably nothing wrong with that. But you have to make sure that you understand the data and you're not taking it out of context. So that's one warning that I do want to give and that I kind of predict will happen. I'm researching with an individual in the psychology department, and we both have had many conversations on health assessments and how we can sometimes misinterpret the data. So one thing when you're looking at these continuous glucometers, people will say, well, I really, really want to have a completely steady amount of glucose in my bloodstream at all times. Any fluctuation is bad, and I need to change my diet.
Is that even possible? No, I didn't think so.
See, yeah, exactly. So you're critically thinking. So thank you so much. Yes, exactly. It's not possible because you don't eat every second of every day the exact same thing, right? You're going to have meals where you're going to have blood sugar spikes. You're going to have times where you're fasted, for example, overnight, and your liver has to release some of that glucose, and so it can bring those blood sugar levels up. And so there's going to be a lot of misinterpretation of that data, especially for individuals that are not educated or they don't really need to be worried about glucose levels. So that's just one thing to kind of keep in the back of your brain is take your physician advice and make sure when you're looking at your data, you're interpreting it correctly. So maybe you are in the camp, though, where your physician's like, hey, you're pre-diabetic. Should we just go ahead and give you a CGM? Or kind of want you to monitor this a little bit more. If that's what your physician says, fabulous. It's It's really cool because your physician can usually then see your charts and graphs and data in real time. The other thing that your physician's probably going to say is, let's think about lifestyle. So it's not just diet and just exercise. Did you know when you are stressed, it actually can influence your blood glucose levels?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, because if you think about it, blood glucose levels are influenced by hormones, right? And when you're stressed, really, really anxious or worried, you secrete different hormones. And so there's a lot of things that go into diabetes and prediabetes. And so that's the other thing too, is let's take some of the guilt and the shame out of maybe being diagnosed with prediabetes. It's okay. There's a lot of things in your life that are stressful. We have fast food that's convenient. Exercise is sometimes hard to fit in. But if you are diagnosed and your physician says we need to make some lifestyle changes, well, what can we do? Number one is definitely thinking about diet. So usually, and I this is kind of near and dear to my heart because my mother is a type 1 diabetic. And so I know quite a lot about this from her perspective. And she always will say things like, I'm so sorry that I have to eat at a certain time. I feel bad because I'm making the family eat earlier or later. And the thing that you have to realize too is that as a diabetic, all of those things that you are seeing on your sensor, they also happen to somebody that's not diabetic, but just not to that extent. So for example, and I want to elaborate on that so it's not misconstrued. If my mother needs a snack at 4 p.m., there's a really good chance that my body, as somebody that's not diabetic, gosh, I probably need a snack too, because if we ate lunch at the same time and we're going to eat dinner at the same time, it's been 6 hours since I've had anything in my system. Say in the morning, my mother needs a high protein breakfast. Well, chances are, even if I'm not diabetic, a high protein breakfast is going to help me feel better. And so that's the other thing too, is let's take again some of the stigma away from being diagnosed as diabetic. So here are some of the things that we can do. Complex carbohydrates and diversify complex carbohydrates. I was listening to a podcast and it was of a registered dietitian, and they were talking about how we really don't have very much diversity of carbohydrates in our diet. As far as like products that we consume a lot of grains. We don't really consume very many oats, not very many lentils. And so if we can like diversify complex carbohydrates, again, great for a diabetic, great for somebody that's not. I need to take my own advice, right? Incorporate lentils into my day. Number two, increase fiber. If you talk to any registered dietitian, any PhD in nutrition, we're all going to say you need more fiber, period. I mean, fiber is just one of those things that blanket statement, there's very few people that have enough fiber in their diet. Next is pair proteins and carbohydrates together. A lot of times when you pair those together, it makes you feel more full, more satisfied, but it also can blunt the glucose spike, which is really cool. Think about like low glycemic foods, meaning instead of having something that would have a lot of sugar really quickly released into your body, think about things that would be a little bit more slow releasing. There are some different fruits and vegetables that are fabulous for you, that maybe, spike blood sugar a little bit. And so, your body, if you have, banana spiking your blood sugar, then maybe do half of a banana and some grapes. And so kind of even those out. And then lastly, people don't usually think about this. We also need to limit saturated fats then. So saturated and trans fats, those would also influence just general health. So in doing all of these things, diet-wise, that should help to control your prediabetes a little bit. The next thing that we should do is incorporate exercise in any capacity. Whatever you love to do, do it. Do it as much as you can and make it fun and something that's sustainable. Other thing too, and kind of the last thing is way easier said than done, manage stress levels. Don't stress about it.
What about if you have good stress in your life? Are your levels still going to go up?
No, yes and no. So you're right. Everybody needs enough stress in their life. And so they're excited and they're happy and they're wanting to get out of bed to go to work and they're doing things. So yeah, if you think about that, you have to have energy to do those things, right? If you're excited about something, well, how do you fuel excitement? glucose, right?
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. So it's any stress. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing though, because if you're high energy and you're doing things, you're going to be using that glucose.
Right.
It's when you're stressing and you are not, there's no purpose, right? For some of that release. That's when we just want to try to manage stress levels as a whole. And so we're not in a state of like chronic stress. But yeah, any type of stimulus is going to make your blood sugar raise a little bit. But again, that's healthy. We need that.
And I also thinking that exercise and how important that is, but that can help relieve stress as well.
Absolutely.
So they go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing too to note is if a person is diabetic or if you are really monitoring your glucose levels, you do need to make sure you're safe, right? And so make sure that you're talking to your physician and your glucose levels are at some sort of starting number that's going to be healthful for you. We don't want them to fall when you're exercising, because if they fall when you're exercising, that's not going to be good for you either. And so it really is a balancing act. And I think that that's something that we forget, that everything about this is a balancing act between stress and mental health and physical health and, diet, exercise. They all go hand in hand. And so anything is better than nothing in any sector. So if right now in your life, you're thinking, I cannot commit to more exercise, but maybe I can commit to some meditation in the middle of my day at lunch just to kind of chill out and reduce stress levels, that's still going to be helpful.
Take that first step.
Exactly. Take that first step, whatever that first step looks like. Anything is better than nothing.